As I would love to hear more of those stories, but we have a certain period of we have a certain time limit. I want to get
Yep.
to some interesting stuff. Sorry,
Cool.
more interesting stuff because all that was pretty fucking interesting.
Yeah.
I want to get into some common flying myths.
Okay.
And I'm going to list these myths to you. You tell me if it's a myth or a fact and give me like a brief sentence why.
Sure.
Okay, so number one, pilots are completely useless. All we need is autopilot.
Negative. That's not true at all, because we are making decisions all the time. Autopilot takes part of the workload, but there's a lot of actual monitoring. And I was under the impression that when I fly these big jets, oh, it's all going to be autopilot. But there's the autopilot, but managing the autopilot. And then on top of that, managing any emergencies that come, managing any weather that you have to fly through, or anything that can happen in the air. So at the end of the day, pilot will still be a pilot. Yes, planes can now take off and land by themselves, but
Really?
that's yes, absolutely. Planes can land. The plane that I fly right now lands by itself if it has to. If the weather is bad enough, you can program the autopilot to land it, but the captain flies the whole approach, and he's got his hands all on all the time, because in case something goes wrong, or if he doesn't like something or we don't like something, we can abort it and come back and try it again.
Right.
So autopilot is not everything. It's just basically, as pilots, we're managing systems, but we're in final control.
Dude, if someone ever asked me, do you trust like a machine or a person? I would always trust the person. I don't know why. Like logically,
Yeah.
you think you trust a piece of advanced technology that has like the
Mm.
capacity of many people, but it always, for
Yeah.
me, it always comes down to a person makes better judgment calls.
Exactly, and the machine can't do that. So it's the intuition, the experience that you have, and the captains that we fly with, the pilots that we have, they have so much experience. They've seen a lot of things, right? They've gone through moments of severe turbulence. They have seen emergencies. They have seen engine failures, fires, onboard, passenger emergency. They've seen all of it. So it's based on their experiences and their intuition and the SOPs. We always have to follow the standard operating procedures.
Okay.
Within all those limitations, that's when we make a decision. It's not just let's just do it and then see what happens.
That's like I said, I'll always trust that sense of intuition.
Exactly.
Second myth, lightning strikes planes.
What about it actually? What do you want to know?
Does it happen?
It does all the time.
Can
So
we turn off that option?
no, I wish, but unfortunately, sometimes you're going through weather, and it can happen. And most planes are built to withstand that, so it's not going to be a situation where lightning strikes and that's it. You just fall out of the sky. That's never going to happen. There are instances where there's been holes left. So lightning, whenever it hits, basically it's entering from a point and it needs an exit.
Yeah.
So whenever lightning strikes, yes, it's not a like
it's not great.
I mean, it's not a situation where you're just gonna fall out of the sky, but you have to now make that decision that, okay, you did have maybe a severe lightning strike. Now what are we gonna do? What are our options? And once they safely bring the airplane on the ground, then that plane is not flying for a long time, because they have to see where the exit hole is. What's happening? Where is that going to come out from?
Yeah.
What actual damages that's happened on the airplane? And then the aircraft engineers and maintenance has to sit down and make sure that the plane is airworthy again.
Has it ever happened to you?
No, it has not. No.
Do you know how
No.
it would feel like hypothetically? Like, would it just feel like a bounce or a shake?
It's more like just like how you hear a thunderstorm, like you hear the thunder. And then on top of that, if you're a pilot up front, usually if it hits the nose of the airplane, it's like a camera flash that you weren't expecting. It's just bright
Blinds
for
you.
and it just blinds you for 2 seconds, right? I mean, obviously the autopilot on, so you don't have to really worry about anything. But yeah, that's from what I've heard from people who've been hit. They said, yeah, it's just blinding for 2 seconds, and then you're like, oh yeah, okay, we got hit by lightning, and then Next step is let's make sure all the instruments and all the systems are working right. If they are, okay, let's continue. If something's off and they have to maybe deviate, fine. The good thing is there's so many airports around the world that you can just land now. So it's never really an issue. You'll never, if it's an actual emergency, you wouldn't be in the air for much long.
Right. I just hope it never happens when I'm in the plane. It can happen to other people on other planes that I'm not inside, but like I like to think specifically when I enter a plane, I get a pass.
Yeah, it's
So
it's just part of flying, right? So you can't get away from that.
next one. This is not a myth, more like I always hear this term, but I never know what it means. What does red eye mean? Taking the
Red
red
eye,
eye.
yeah. So taking the red eye means a night flight. What happens is because you're awake all night, when you
Hmm.
when you reach destination, your eyes are red. That's how it all
Oh,
came. So I didn't know that too. Actually, I was in flight school. I should have known this, but I was in flight school, and we had one of the senior captains at one of the major airlines come in, and he was talking, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just took the red eye yesterday." And I'm looking over to my buddy. I'm like, "What's he talking about?" He's, "Man, how do you not know what a red eye is?" But yeah, red eye is basically overnight flying, which is most of what cargo pilots do. So a lot of my flying is also red eye.
I mean, it seems like a pretty convenient excuse, especially in Canada. Oh, yeah, I just did a red eye. There's no other reasons to
No other reason.
explain the redness of my eye. Oh, it looks a bit glassy. That's just part of red eye, man. Oh, that smell, you're smelling red eye. There's no other explanation for these smells in Canada. Next myth. Can a passenger fly the plane in an emergency?
Yes and no, and it's happened before.
And when I say fly, I mean fly successfully, like no one dies.
Successfully, yes. So it's happened. It actually recently happened. Uh, they were flying, and it was just a pilot and two passengers in a smaller airplane, and the pilot got, I don't know if he got a heart attack or there was some medical emergency. He was basically incapacitated. He couldn't fly or do anything, and then the passenger did it. So at that point again, it comes down to communication, right? There was a controller of an ATC that said he kind of understood what was going on, and he guided this passenger to do it. It's There has been instances in the past where that's happened, and the passengers just didn't know what to do. So it's a hit or a miss, but passengers can definitely do it if it came down to it. Yes.
Oof. But I'm guessing it can happen for like we're talking about like a double decker Airbus or a pretty big Boeing.
Okay, so if you're flying those kind of airplanes, you need two pilots minimum. And with your flying Airbus A380, which what Emirates has and all these bigger airlines,
It's a beautiful plane.
yeah, and they have four pilots because that plane can, do a 17-hour flight. So you need four pilots. So you'll never be in a situation where like a passenger has to come, and fly the airplane. A plane that size. Plus,
Yeah.
like a plane that size could land by itself, but you need to actually know how to manage the automation to set it up for it. So
So there's a
it's a
lot of
lot.
programming that goes in it, like calibration.
Exactly. So if I had to go and fly an airplane that I've never flown, I would get by it and I could do it because, well, at least I have a basic understanding of aviation. So even if I've never flown it, maybe just the basics I could get away with and safely land. But if someone just has no idea how to do it, then you're lost because, hey, what are you going to do?
Die mostly. Okay. So the last myth, can we trust the airplane's coffee, specifically the water that is used to make that coffee? I
I
say
don't
this
know.
having drank like liters of airplane coffee and then hearing the myth.
Yeah, I'm actually not even sure because I never have airplane coffee in general.
Yeah.
So, and our airplanes actually have like a kettle that you can make your own coffee, but we have bottled water in our airplane, so we just use that and then heat up water. So we know it's clean,
Yeah.
but I have stories of some airlines or some places where it's like it's just any water, and I don't know.
Yeah.
I
To the
can't.
viewers out there, the origin of this myth is that Basically, the water used in the coffee they offer everybody does not come from a clean source. Apparently, they don't clean the tank too much, and it's pretty filthy. That's the myth.
It might be a myth. I don't know. I can't really comment on that because I don't know myself. I just never have airplane coffee
Yeah,
myself. So
we'll have to bring a stewardess on the show or something. Okay. So I told you I'm going to ask you about this. I'm totally going to ask about this. And this thing that I'm going to ask you is basically the enemy of all pilots, the thing they fear the most, the thing that happens, it could be sudden death. Ashwin, First Officer Ashwin, tell me about how dangerous turbulence is.
it's not dangerous at all. We go through turbulence every single
Oh,
day.
I didn't expect that answer, but okay.
Yeah, that's all it
We
is.
differ in
It's
opinion, Ashwin.
yeah, it's just a pocket of air, right? So if air gets disrupted somehow, uh, you'll get a little bit of turbulence. You can be landing in an area that has mountains all around. You'll get air that's flowing through the mountains and cause a little bit of turbulence. But pilots are trained for that. We get used to it. We build experience. We're able to cope up with it. Plus, on top of that, pilots help pilots. Air traffic controllers help pilots. So when we're in the air, it's quite different for cargo pilots because a little bit of turbulence, it's okay, no worries. But when you have passengers in the back that can get sick, that's when you start to ask, right? So usually when you're flying, pilots are telling, hey, they always give reports back to the air traffic controller, letting them know, hey, listen, we were at 33,000 feet and we got moderate turbulence here. So we're requesting a different altitude because when you go up or higher or lower, sometimes it's smoother. So let's go there. So they always do that. Passenger pilots, all the time, they're always asking like, hey, what are the weather reports further ahead? Any turbulence? And if they come back and they say yes, there is, then they start to change altitudes or change their route a little bit. Sometimes even storms passing by can create a lot of turbulence.
Yeah.
But that's why we have weather radar in our planes, and we can see sometimes that, hey, you can see if you pass through this, it's going to be severe turbulence. So what we do is we deviate around it. We ask for directions to go around it all the time. So the whole point of this is at all times, passenger comfort comes first. So we're not sitting there because even though we can deal with it, we're not sitting there like, oh, it's fine. They can just deal with it. We're always like, okay, let's go away from it because, hey, the passengers are not used to it. There might be some nervous flyers that might not be okay at all. So we want you experience, right?
What was the worst you've ever dealt with for
Well,
turbulence?
it's just moderate turbulence, just bumpy thunderstorms passing by. That creates a lot of changes, right? And you just get turbulence. But it's never been a situation where like, oh my God, this is like out of control. I've never been in that situation ever. It's always knowing how to deal with it. And a lot of times, if you slow the airplane down a little bit, also helps because if you're going faster, penetrating through that area of turbulence faster will create a lot more bumps. So you end up slowing it down so you don't exceed the structural limits of the airplane itself.